First contact tensions. Commander Elena Reyes stood at the viewport of the UES Aurora, watching the imposing vessels of the Meridian Collective arrange themselves in what any military strategist would recognize as a classic encirclement pattern. Their ships resembled massive crystalline structures, glinting with blue-violet energy along geometric patterns, beautiful but unmistakably designed to intimidate. "They're not even trying to be subtle about it," remarked Lieutenant Commander Jackson from behind her, his voice tight with controlled tension. "They don't feel the need to be," Elena replied without turning. She'd spent 15 years in the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, and she recognized the tactics. The Meridians weren't just positioning for tactical advantage. They were making a statement. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. "Commander," called Communications Officer Patel, "Admiral Zextahar is requesting to resume negotiations." Elena nodded, straightening her midnight blue uniform. "Put it through to the conference room. Assemble the team." The conference room aboard the Aurora was designed specifically for diplomatic encounters. A circular table of polished birchwood from Earth, chairs accommodating various physiologies, and state-of-the-art holographic systems. Elena took her position as the air above the table shimmered, coalescing into the towering figure of Admiral Zextahar. The Meridian Admiral stood nearly 8 feet tall, with iridescent skin that shifted between deep blue and violet. 4 arms were clasped formally in front of a torso covered in ceremonial armor, while compound eyes, similar to those of Earth insects, but unnervingly intelligent, studied the humans. "Commander Reyes," the Admiral's voice resonated with artificial translation harmonics, "I trust you have considered our position regarding the Epsilon sector." Elena maintained the measured calm that had become her trademark in the diplomatic corps. "Admiral, we have reviewed your territorial claims, and I must restate that they conflict with established human surveying records. The Epsilon Junction was charted by human explorers 17 standard years ago, and our scientific outpost has been operational for 12. Zextahar's upper limbs made a dismissive gesture. "Your records are irrelevant. The collective has determined that Epsilon Junction and its surrounding space fall within our sphere of influence. Your presence there is unauthorized." "With respect, Admiral," Elena countered, activating a holographic display of her own. "These are our survey records, bearing timestamps and coordinates that predate any Meridian claims by at least 3 years. The Admiral's compound eyes narrowed slightly. "Commander, perhaps you misunderstand your position. The Meridian Collective has existed for 12 millennia. We have brought order to 37 star systems. Your species has barely managed interstellar travel for a century." The Admiral leaned forward, his image growing larger. "Your scientific outpost will be removed. You may choose whether it is removed intact with your personnel or as debris." Lieutenant Commander Jackson tensed beside her, but Elena raised a hand subtly, cautioning patience. "Admiral, I urge you to reconsider. There's no need for conflict. We propose joint research initiatives at Epsilon Junction. The anomalies detected there could benefit both our civilizations. The collective does not require human assistance to study stellar phenomena," Zextahar stated flatly. "Your proposals of cooperation are transparent attempts to maintain presence in space that is not yours." Elena tried another approach. "The United Earth Coalition values peaceful relations with all spacefaring species. A military confrontation would harm both our interests." For the first time, something like amusement flickered across the Admiral's features. "Your concern for peace is noted, Commander. However, your rhetoric reveals your weakness. The collective has studied human history extensively. You negotiate because you lack the strength to enforce your claims." The statement hung in the air, challenging and dismissive. Elena felt the eyes of her team on her, waiting for her response. "Admiral," she said carefully, "I believe you may be misinterpreting our diplomatic approach. Humans value communication and cooperation because we've learned through our history that war is costly for all parties involved, not because we fear it." "A convenient philosophy for the weaker party," Zextahar responded. "The collective's position is non-negotiable. You have 48 standard hours to evacuate your personnel from Epsilon Junction. After that time, we will remove your installation by whatever means necessary." Before Elena could respond, the Admiral's hologram dissipated, leaving the human delegation alone in the conference room. "Well," Jackson said after a moment of tense silence, "that went about as well as expected." Dr. Simmons, their xenoanthropologist, shook her head. "The Meridians evolved from hive-based social structures. Their entire civilization is built on clear hierarchies and demonstrations of strength. They interpret our diplomatic overtures as confirmation of weakness." Elena stared at the empty space where the Admiral's hologram had been. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha." 20 minutes later, Elena stood alone in her secure communications room, facing the stern visage of Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen. His weathered face showed little emotion as she concluded her report. "So diplomatic options are failing," he stated rather than asked. "The Meridians appear unwilling to consider compromise, Admiral. They've essentially issued an ultimatum: evacuate or be destroyed." Chen nodded slowly. "And your assessment of their capabilities?" "Their technology appears advanced. Energy signatures from their vessels suggest weapons systems at least comparable to our own, possibly superior. They've positioned 7 capital ships and approximately 20 support vessels in a containment formation around Epsilon Junction. And they believe we won't fight for it," Chen said, his expression unreadable. "They believe we can't fight for it effectively," Elena corrected. "They've studied our history but misinterpreted our preference for diplomacy as evidence of military weakness." A ghost of a smile touched Chen's lips, a common mistake when dealing with humanity. He paused, seemingly making a decision. "Commander Reyes, continue diplomatic efforts for now. Make it appear that we're considering their ultimatum seriously. Request extensions, propose alternatives, keep them talking." "Sir, just buy us time, Commander. 48 hours isn't much, but it might be enough." "Enough for what, Admiral?" Chen's expression hardened. "Let's just say the Meridians aren't the only ones who can arrange a surprise. Authorization code. Avalanche protocol. Effective immediately." Elena felt her pulse quicken. The Avalanche protocol wasn't common knowledge even among high-ranking officers. "Understood, sir. How should I proceed when the time comes?" "You'll know, Commander. When diplomatic options are truly exhausted, inform the Meridians clearly. Use these exact words: 'We are done talking.' My sources tell me the Meridians value clear communication about intent." The transmission ended, leaving Elena with a mixture of apprehension and curious anticipation. She had 48 hours to pretend diplomacy still had a chance while whatever Avalanche protocol entailed unfolded behind the scenes. The next day and a half proceeded in a tense dance of proposals and counterproposals. Elena offered compromises she knew the Meridians would reject, but each rejection bought precious hours. Admiral Zextahar grew increasingly impatient, but seemed to enjoy what he perceived as humans scrambling desperately for solutions. "Commander Reyes, your persistence borders on admirable," the Admiral commented during their 5th conversation, "but it changes nothing. Your time is running out." "Admiral, surely there's room for compromise. The anomaly at Epsilon Junction appears to be artificially created. It could be technology from a precursor civilization. Working together, we cold." "The collective requires no assistance," Zextahar interrupted. "Any valuable discoveries will be shared with lesser species if we deem it appropriate." Elena noted the Admiral's growing condescension with each exchange. The Meridians were becoming overconfident, convinced of their superiority and humanity's helplessness. It was exactly what Admiral Chen had suggested would happen. 46 hours into the ultimatum, Elena received a simple encrypted message from Fleet Command. "Protocol complete. Proceed as instructed." When Admiral Zextahar's hologram appeared for what would be their final conversation, his posture radiated impatience. "Commander Reyes, the collective's patience has limits. Your evacuation should be well underway by now." Elena stood straighter, her demeanor subtly shifting. The diplomatic smile that had been her mask for the past 2 days faded, replaced by something calmer, more resolute. Admiral Zextahar, I've communicated extensively with my government regarding your claims and demands. And they have wisely chosen evacuation, the Admiral presumed. No, Admiral, they have not. Elena's voice remained perfectly level. The United Earth Coalition does not recognize the Meridian Collective's claim to Epsilon Junction. We will not withdraw our research station or personnel. For the first time, Zextahar appeared genuinely surprised. You cannot be serious. You have observed our fleet. You know you cannot defend this position. That's where you're wrong, Admiral, Elena replied, her voice taking on a quality that made several Meridian officers visible in the background look up sharply. We've attempted reasonable dialogue. We've proposed multiple compromises. We've provided evidence of our prior claim. You have rejected all diplomatic solutions. She paused, letting the moment stretch, then delivered the message exactly as instructed. We are done talking. The Admiral's compound eyes widened slightly, perhaps at the sudden change in her tone, or the finality of the statement. A curious choice of words, Commander, he said, recovering quickly. But ultimately meaningless. If you choose destruction over evacuation, the Collective will oblige. You misunderstand. Admiral, Elena replied, her calm now somehow more unsettling than anger would have been. It wasn't a threat. It was a notification of a change in status. As if on cue, proximity alarms began blaring on the Meridian command ship. Elena could see officers rushing to stations behind the Admiral. Admiral, one of them called urgently. Multiple FTL signatures detected. Vessels emerging across sectors 7 through 12. Zextahar turned back to Elena, compound eyes narrowing. What is this? This, Admiral, Elena said quietly, is why humans prefer to resolve conflicts through diplomacy. Not because we can't fight, but because we'd rather not demonstrate just how well we can. The holographic transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Commander Reyes standing alone on the bridge of the Aurora, watching through the viewport as space itself seemed to ripple and tear as the first vessels of the Earth fleet emerged from FTL. Not a handful of ships, but dozens, then hundreds. Humanity had indeed stopped talking. Now they would show precisely what that meant. The silent preparation. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the EFS Indomitable, watching the tactical hologram as it displayed the ongoing deployment. Ships were appearing in precise formation. Cruisers, destroyers, and specialized assault vessels arranging themselves according to the meticulously planned avalanche protocol. Fleet deployment at 73%. Admiral, reported Commander Sarah Liang, his tactical officer. All vessels reporting optimal status. Chen nodded, his face impassive. The avalanche protocol had been developed years ago as a contingency for exactly this type of situation. A rapid, overwhelming show of force designed to counter the common misperception that humanity's diplomatic nature equated to military weakness. Stealth field generators performing beyond expected parameters, added Lieutenant Rodriguez from the engineering station. The Meridian detection systems haven't registered our presence beyond the initial emergent signatures. Chen allowed himself a small smile. The stealth field technology was one of humanity's most closely guarded advantages, the product of decades of research that had begun long before humans had encountered other spacefaring civilizations. While not true invisibility, it reduced sensor signatures to such minimal levels that most species mistook the readings for background radiation or equipment malfunctions. Open secure channel to Commander Reyes on the Aurora, Chen ordered. Moments later, the Lena Reyes appeared on the command screen. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the assembled fleet now visible on her own tactical displays. Admiral Chen, she said, composure quickly returning. I wasn't aware we had this many vessels within deployment range of Epsilon Junction. That was rather the point, Commander, Chen replied. The Meridians have been operating under the assumption that Earth's military presence in this sector consisted primarily of your diplomatic vessel and a handful of patrol ships. And instead you've brought. Alina glanced at her readings. Over 200 combat vessels. 264, to be precise, Chen corrected, including the Indomitable and 5 other Horizon-class dreadnoughts. The Avalanche Protocol calls for overwhelming force, deployed with maximum surprise effect. Elena nodded slowly. The Meridians are scrambling. Admiral Zextahar has been attempting to re-establish communication since our fleet began appearing. And you've been deliberately slow to respond, Chen stated with approval. Yes, sir. I thought they might benefit from experiencing the same communication difficulties they imposed on us during negotiations. Chen's lips twitched in a suppressed smile. Psychological warfare has its place. Commander, how would you assess their current state? Confused, alarmed, possibly reconsidering their assumptions about humanity's capabilities. Elena paused. Sir, may I ask how long this operation has been in preparation? The Avalanche Protocol itself has existed for nearly 15 years, Chen explained. As for this specific deployment, we've been monitoring Meridian movements in this sector for months. Their interest in Epsilon Junction wasn't exactly subtle. So while I've been negotiating, elements of the 3rd, 5th, and 7th fleets have been positioning themselves at strategic jump points, ready to converge when needed. Chen's expression grew more serious. The Meridians aren't the first species to mistake our preference for peace as weakness, Commander. They likely won't be the last. On the Meridian command vessel Eternal Vigilance, Admiral Zextahar stared at the tactical display with disbelief morphing rapidly into fury. The human fleet had appeared from nowhere, emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, surrounding his forces in a precise reversal of the encirclement pattern he had used against them. Impossible, he muttered, 4 arms clenching in agitation. Our intelligence indicated the humans had perhaps 20 combat vessels in this entire sector. Strategic Officer Vex Moray approached cautiously. Admiral, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with weapon systems far more advanced than our intelligence suggested. The human vessels appear to be equipped with graviton-based weapons platforms and phase-shifted shield technology. How could our intelligence be so wrong? Zextahar demanded, compound eyes fixed on the overwhelming force now arrayed against his fleet. Admiral, Communications Officer Nex Lorai interrupted. We're receiving transmission from the human diplomatic vessel. Zextahar straightened his posture, determined not to show weakness despite the shocking reversal of their tactical situation. Display. Commander Elena Reyes appeared on screen, her expression calm and professional as ever, but with a subtle shift in her demeanor that hadn't been present during their previous encounters. Admiral Zextahar, she began, I apologize for the delay in responding to your communications. As you can see, we've had some fleet movements to coordinate. The casual understatement hung in the air between them. Commander Reyes. Zextahar responded, struggling to maintain his dignified tone. This unprovoked military escalation confirms the collective's concerns about human expansionism. Elena raised an eyebrow. Unprovoked, Admiral. You surrounded our research station with warships and issued an ultimatum threatening its destruction. A necessary security measure in collective territory. Territory which we have established is not yours, Elena countered smoothly. Now perhaps we should return to diplomatic discussions. I believe the situation has changed sufficiently to warrant reconsideration of our proposals for joint research initiatives at Epsilon Junction. The implication was clear. The balance of power had shifted dramatically, and the humans were offering the Meridians a graceful way to back down without losing face entirely. Zextahar felt his secondary heart rate increase with barely controlled rage. The collective does not respond to intimidation tactics. Nor do we. Admiral, Elena replied, her voice cooling several degrees. Which is why we ignored yours. Now we find ourselves at an impasse that could have been avoided through genuine diplomatic engagement. Back aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the exchange with approval. Commander Rice was handling the situation perfectly, offering the Meridians a diplomatic solution, while making it clear that humanity now held the tactical advantage. "Admiral," Commander Liang called from her station, "we're detecting power fluctuations in the Meridian vessels. They appear to be activating weapons systems." Chen nodded, unsurprised. As expected. The Meridian cultural profile indicates they're unlikely to accept an apparent reversal in status without some form of resistance, even symbolic. Should we power our own weapons in response? Not yet, Chen decided. Let's see how far they're willing to push this. On the tactical display, 7 Meridian vessels broke formation, moving into offensive positions. Energy readings indicated weapons charging, but not yet targeting Earth ships. "A demonstration of capability," Chen murmured. "They want to save face." Through the open channel with the Aurora, they could hear Admiral Zextahar's response to Commander Ray's. "The Meridian Collective has maintained order in this quadrant for millennia before humans achieved spaceflight. We will not be dictated to by newcomers, regardless of their unexpected fleet strength." "No one is dictating terms, Admiral," Elena replied patiently. "We're proposing cooperation, as we have from the beginning, under threat of your weapons. Under exactly the same conditions you created," Elena pointed out. "The difference is that we're still offering peaceful resolution despite the changed circumstances." Zextahar's compound eyes narrowed. "The collective requires time to consider these developments." "Of course," Elena agreed smoothly. "We're prepared to allow 24 hours for you to consult with your leadership. Our forces will maintain their current positions, provided yours do the same." The transmission ended, and Chen nodded with satisfaction. "Well handled, Commander. You've given them a way to retreat without immediate humiliation. Do you think they'll take it?" Elena asked. "No," Chen replied frankly. "Our psychological profiles on the Meridians suggest they're more likely to test our resolve before accepting any compromise. They've evolved from apex predators and built their entire civilization on principles of dominance hierarchies. They'll need to convince themselves that we're truly capable of backing up our position with force. So this fleet deployment isn't just for show." "It never is, Commander," Chen said gravely. "The Avalanche Protocol is designed to prevent conflicts through overwhelming deterrence, but we're fully prepared for combat if deterrence fails." Elena nodded, her expression somber. "I'll continue diplomatic efforts, but I understand the reality of our position." "Good, because the next 24 hours will determine whether this becomes a footnote in diplomatic history or the opening chapter of humanity's first major interstellar conflict." As the hours passed, intelligence reports confirmed Chen's prediction. Meridian communications traffic had increased dramatically, not just with their home systems, but with military outposts throughout the sector. They were calling for reinforcements while simultaneously deploying what appeared to be specialized scanner drones around the perimeter of the human fleet. "They're looking for weaknesses," Commander Liang observed, "trying to determine if our fleet is as formidable as it appears. And probably wondering if we have more ships waiting to jump in," Chen added. "Let them wonder. Uncertainty is a powerful psychological weapon." 16 hours into the waiting period, the tactical situation changed. Long-range sensors detected multiple FTL signatures approaching, Meridian reinforcements arriving faster than expected. "They must have had forces positioned closer than we realized," Chen mused, studying the incoming signatures. "Interesting." "Sir," Liang prompted. "They're committing substantial resources to this confrontation. Either Epsilon Junction is more valuable to them than our intelligence suggested, or they can't afford to lose face." Liang completed the thought. Chen nodded. "Inform all vessels to maintain yellow alert status. No aggressive moves, but be prepared for the situation to escalate." When the 24-hour grace period ended, both fleets had grown. The Meridians now had nearly 100 vessels arrayed against humanity's larger force. Not enough to win a direct confrontation, but enough to inflict significant damage if conflict erupted. Admiral Zextahar's hologram appeared once more before Commander Reyes, and, by extension, Admiral Chen. "The collective has considered your position," the Meridian began, his tone carrying none of the dismissiveness of their earlier encounters. "We propose a compromise. The Epsilon Junction will be designated as neutral territory, with joint research teams from both our civilizations." Elena glanced toward Chen's image on a secondary display, receiving a subtle nod. "That proposal is acceptable in principle, Admiral," she responded. "However, given recent events, we would require specific security protocols to prevent future misunderstandings." Zextahar's posture stiffened slightly. "Such as a demilitarized zone extending 3 light-years in all directions from Epsilon Junction. No military vessels from either civilization without prior notification and approval." The Meridian Admiral was silent for several moments. "These terms are not unreasonable," he finally conceded. "However, the collective must maintain its security presence in adjacent sectors." "Of course," Elena agreed, "as will Earth. But Epsilon Junction itself will remain neutral ground." The negotiations continued for several more hours, hammering out details of the agreement. Throughout, Admiral Chen remained connected, but largely silent, allowing Commander Reyes to lead the diplomatic process now that the military deterrent had done its work. When the final agreement was reached and the transmission with the Meridians ended, Chen spoke privately to Elena. "You've achieved what many thought impossible, Commander, a peaceful resolution after they explicitly threatened military action against our installation." Elena shook her head slightly. "With respect, Admiral, it wasn't my diplomatic skills that changed their minds. It was the 200-plus warships you brought to the negotiating table." Chen smiled, a rare expression on his usually stern face. "An important lesson about humanity that the Meridians have now learned firsthand. We prefer to talk, Commander Reyes. But when we say when words end." The transition from diplomatic solution to military confrontation came not with a dramatic declaration or ultimatum, but with a simple tactical error. 27 hours after the tentative agreement had been reached, as legal teams from both sides worked on formalizing the treaty language, a small squadron of Meridian vessels broke formation. "Admiral," Commander Liang called out, her voice tense, "5 Meridian strike craft have changed vector, approaching the research station at Epsilon Junction." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Weapons status: active but not locked. They appear to be conducting a close-range scan of the facility." On the Aurora, Commander Reyes immediately opened a channel to Admiral Zextahar. "Admiral, your vessels are violating the operational boundaries we established. Please recall them immediately." The Meridian Admiral's compound eyes shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as their equivalent of a frown. "A routine security assessment, Commander. Standard procedure before formalizing any territorial agreement." "That was not part of our arrangement," Elena replied firmly. "Those vessels are to withdraw to the established boundary immediately." There was a pause, during which Elena could see Zextahar conferring with other Meridians off-screen. His mandibles clicked in what appeared to be irritation before he responded. "Very well, Commander. An overzealous subordinate. The vessels will be recalled." But the Meridian ships continued their approach. "Admiral," Elena pressed, "your vessels are still advancing." "A communication delay," Zextahar replied, his tone now carrying a hint of what might have been nervousness. "They will comply momentarily." Admiral Chen, monitoring the situation from the Indomitable, made a quick decision. "Deploy interceptors, passive posture. Position between the research station and the approaching Meridian vessels." Within moments, 12 human interceptor craft launched from nearby carriers, streaking toward the research station with remarkable speed. They took up defensive positions, creating a barrier between the facility and the advancing Meridian ships. The Meridian vessels halted their approach, now facing the human interceptors across a narrow band of space. "Admiral Zextahar," Elena's voice had cooled considerably, We agreed to good faith negotiations. This provocative action suggests otherwise. A misunderstanding. The Admiral insisted. Nothing more. Then have your ships withdraw now. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, with evident reluctance, the Meridian vessels began to turn away. That should have been the end of it. A minor incident, quickly resolved. But as the Meridian ships pivoted, energy readings spiked on one of them. "Weapons lock," shouted a sensor officer on the Indomitable. "One Meridian vessel has targeted our interceptors." Before anyone could react, a brilliant beam of energy lanced out from the Meridian ship, striking one of the human interceptors. The small craft's shields flared brilliantly, absorbing the impact without apparent damage. A testament to human defensive technology that clearly surprised the Meridians. In an instant, the situation transformed. All ships, defensive positions. Chen ordered calmly. "Weapons hot but hold fire unless fired upon." On the diplomatic channel, Alina's expression had hardened to granite. "Admiral Zextahar, one of your vessels has fired upon our interceptor. Explain immediately." The Meridian Admiral's compound eyes widened in what appeared to be genuine shock. "I gave no such order." "This is an unauthorized action by a subordinate." Alina finished for him. "That makes twice in the span of minutes. Admiral, either you've lost control of your fleet, or this is a deliberate provocation disguised as a series of misunderstandings." Zextahar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. "Commander Reyes, I assure you." But Alina had reached her limit. The weeks of dismissive treatment, the thinly veiled threats, the current violation of their agreement, all of it crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. "Admiral," she interrupted, her voice carrying that same eerie calm that had preceded humanity's fleet arrival. "We have negotiated in good faith. We have overlooked provocations. We have offered compromise after compromise. But I warned you once before what it means when humans decide that words have failed." She straightened, her next words delivered with quiet finality. "We are done talking." Again. The transmission cut off, and Alina turned to her tactical officer. "Connect me to Admiral Chen." When Chen's face appeared on screen, she didn't wait for pleasantries. "Admiral, I believe diplomacy has reached its limit. The Meridians are either testing our resolve or have factions within their fleet acting against orders. Either way, words alone won't resolve this situation." Chen nodded grimly. "I concur, Commander." Authorization to implement Avalanche Protocol Phase 2 is granted. Throughout the human fleet, a transformation began. Ships that had maintained defensive positions now shifted into precise attack formations. Stealth field generators that had been operating at minimal levels to allow the Meridians to detect their presence now engaged at full capacity, causing dozens of vessels to seemingly fade from enemy sensors. On the Meridian command ship, alarms blared as sensor officers reported in panicked tones. "Admiral, human vessels are disappearing from our scans." Multiple energy spikes across their fleet. New signatures appearing beyond our perimeter. They had ships we couldn't detect. Admiral Zextahar stared at his tactical display in disbelief as the human fleet seemed to simultaneously vanish and multiply. Where moments before they had faced a formidable but manageable opponent, now they confronted an adversary whose true capabilities had been deliberately concealed. "All vessels, defensive formation," he ordered, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. The humans had allowed the Meridians to see exactly what they wanted them to see, until they decided otherwise. The first strike came not as a barrage of weapon fire, but as something far more sophisticated. Across the Meridian fleet, ship systems began failing. Communication arrays, weapon targeting systems, propulsion controls, all disabled with surgical precision by electronic warfare packages that the humans had apparently planted during the diplomatic phase. "What is happening?" Zextahar demanded as his command console flickered and died before rebooting with limited functionality. "Some kind of advanced cyber attack," his technology officer reported, mandibles clicking frantically. They've compromised our systems through vulnerabilities we didn't know existed. On the Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the operation unfold with quiet satisfaction. The electronic warfare packages, microscopic drones deployed by stealth craft during the initial standoff, had functioned perfectly, infiltrating Meridian systems and lying dormant until activated. "Begin Phase 3, he ordered. "Selective targeting only. Disable, don't destroy." Throughout the human fleet, weapon systems engaged with remarkable precision. Rather than blanket the enemy with destructive fire, they targeted specific systems, engines, weapons arrays, sensor nodes, crippling the Meridian vessels without causing catastrophic damage or casualties. "Sir," Commander Liang reported, 87% of the Meridian fleet has been effectively neutralized. Remaining vessels are attempting to regroup near the outer perimeter. Chen nodded. "Maintain pressure but continue selective targeting. I want them disabled, not destroyed." On the Aurora, Commander Rice watched the operation with a mixture of pride and solemnity. This was why humans preferred diplomacy, not because they couldn't fight, but because they understood all too well how effectively they could. A communication request from the Meridian flagship interrupted her thoughts. "Put it through," she instructed. Admiral Zextahar appeared on screen, his proud bearing now diminished. Background scenes showed emergency lighting and frantic activity. "Commander Reyes," he began, his harmonics translator struggling to maintain proper modulation. "The collective requests. Cessation of hostilities." Elena kept her expression neutral. "To what end, Admiral?" "2. Renegotiate terms." "I believe I made it clear that we are done talking," Elena replied evenly. "Your actions have demonstrated repeatedly that the Meridian Collective cannot be trusted to honor diplomatic agreements. What the Collective offers now is not negotiation," Zextahar said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar tone, humility. "It is surrender." The word hung in the space between them, heavy with significance. In all recorded history, the Meridian Collective had never surrendered to another species. Elena glanced toward the secondary display showing Admiral Chen, who gave a subtle nod. "Very well, Admiral," she responded. "All Meridian vessels will power down weapon systems completely. Your crews will remain aboard but under the supervision of human security teams. The terms of surrender will be transmitted within the hour." Zextahar's compound eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of acceptance. "It will be as you say." When the transmission ended, Elena let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Well done, Commander," Admiral Chen's voice came through her private channel. "A textbook implementation of the Avalanche Protocol. Overwhelming force, precisely applied, with minimal casualties." "Thank you, sir," Elena replied, though her tone carried little triumph. "Though I wonder if we've truly resolved anything, or simply established a different kind of relationship with the Meridians." Chen's expression softened slightly. "That's why you're in the diplomatic corps, Commander. The military secures the conditions. Diplomacy builds what follows. The Meridians needed to learn that humans aren't to be dismissed or threatened. Now they have. What happens next is where your real work begins." In the days that followed, as human security teams established control over the surrendered Meridian fleet and formalized the terms of their withdrawal from the sector, Admiral Zextahar requested a private meeting with Commander Reyes aboard the Aurora. Under heavy security, the Meridian Admiral was escorted to the same conference room where their first contentious meetings had taken place. He seemed smaller somehow, his iridescent exoskeleton dulled, his posture less imperious. "Commander Reyes," he began without preamble, "I have studied your species extensively since our confrontation." Elena waited, saying nothing. "In all our encounters with other civilizations," Zextahar continued, "we have found a consistent pattern. Species either lack the capacity for effective warfare, and thus Relay Claude hit the max length for a message and has paused its response. You can write continue to keep the chat going."